Now here are some gear trends that I absolutely love. Hey everyone, I'm Jack Fossett. Welcome to the channel and welcome to Real Guitar Talk. This is a follow-up to my last Real Guitar Talk video where I talked about guitar trends that I don't like. And I think it's important to clarify exactly what we're talking about when we talk about trends. I'm talking about marketing and sort of a tribal groupthink that happens when one type of product or sort of a theme, I guess, in guitar gear catches on and moves forward. Now I tried to emphasize that by the first gear trend, which I didn't like, to really prove the point, but I think a lot of people didn't quite get where I was coming from, which is small tube amps. And I was talking about small tube amps, like little 5-watt things, and I love little tube amps. I think they're really awesome, and I think they're very useful and very practical. But not for everyone. And that was kind of the point of differentiating the trend from the actual product that you're talking about, right? So when Epiphone came out with the Valve Junior amp, and then all of a sudden it caught on and everybody loved it and thought, well, this is how you get the classic studio tones and things. So then, all these other companies came out with these little tiny, all tube amps, and this sort of went a different direction because this was when modeling was also starting to take off. So you had some people going down the digital road, and then you had other people going down the really old-fashioned road, and everybody started so much so that there was a company, I think, called Blackheart. Was that right? If somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but that really just made these small all tube amps and everything, and then the trend died off. Now, there are still a lot of great small tube amps out there and still a lot of players who really use them and get great use out of them. But that trend of it sort of died off. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about trends. Now, trends, again, as many of you brought up, are not really a great thing because they make us think with pack mentality, and we don't necessarily think for ourselves as much. However, sometimes the things that the trends bring up are actually good, and they're sort of a graduation or a breaking out from another way of thinking that was locking you down. So today I want to talk about trends that I actually like, that I think are really good for guitar players. Number 5. This I actually did a whole video on several years ago, and it was that was kind of a response also to the sort of famous Rick Beato video of string gauges. But when I started playing guitar, it was all about heavy strings. It was kind of a masculinity thing. It was like you need to prove you're a man by using heavier strings. And then of course the famous story about Billy Gibbons and B.B. King came out, and Billy Gibbons using super light strings, and eventually people just started abandoning the you have to have heavy strings. I think you have to have whatever strings you're comfortable with and get a good tone out of. So for those of you who use heavy strings and you like them and that's how you get your tone, good on you. For those of you who like really super light strings and that's how you get your tone, good on you. I've kind of settled to using 9s on a 25-inch scale length, 25 and a half, and using 10s on the smaller scale length guitars. That's about where I'm comfortable. That's where I think, my hand is the most comfortable, and also I like the tone of those strings. Whatever strings you use to get your sound, who's going to tell you otherwise? If you get your tone the way you get your tone, then you're not wrong. And that's going to be kind of the pervasive theme of this whole video. Number 4. Now, in the last video when I was talking about trends I don't like, I of course asked you all to share trends that you don't like too in the comments. Many people brought up digital modeling. But I think what people really don't like are the polarizing attitudes. On this side, again, kind of going back to the amplifier thing, on this side you got people who are all tube amp all the time. Anything less than a tube amp is not real. And then you get people on this side who are all like, digital modeling is the wave of the future. Why are you even using that, ancient technology, and this and that and that and this. Again, when I started playing, it was all about tube amps, and if you played a solid state amp, you were sort of, looked down upon, like you were less than everyone else, and you're using this kind of crap gear and all that. Nowadays, modeling has gotten really good. I have gotten some of my favorite recorded tones ever using digital modeling. And I think the nice thing is that while there are still people on either end, and I think that's again what people really don't like, is those polarizing attitudes, the rest of everyone in the middle can kind of just feel a little bit freer about getting tone however they want and not needing to worry about the judgment of it from other players. It's just kind of like, hey, you get your tone the way you get your tone. And if you get the good tone that you love that suits your music and your style, who's going to tell you otherwise? Hey, see how that theme is being very pervasive in this video? Number 3. Now, this is a direct follow-up to the small tube amp thing, because again, I think some people heard me say that in the last video and sort of misinterpreted what I was trying to say. I love small tube amps. I just thought the trend wasn't right, because really small tube amps aren't for everyone. And even though they are more versatile than people say, they also do have a sound. You know, they're more versatile than a one-trick pony, but they're not the most versatile thing in the world. And dynamically, they sound very different than bigger amps. You know, so for instance, like I would actually be more likely to take a twin reverb, even to a small gig, than I would certain small tube amps. And the reason is because I want that sort of wider, bigger sound. And yes, you can get tube amps to sound good at low volumes. I don't care what anyone says. It just depends on the type of tone that you're going for. If you're going for a massive cranked tone, obviously not. But if you're going for a great clean tone and using it as a pedal platform, you can absolutely get great tones at low volumes. But the trend that I love is companies catching on to the fact that players need practical, reasonable amplifiers for both gigging and recording. And so now I started off thinking like, oh, I'm going to say medium tube amps for this. And I was kind of thinking about it, and particularly thinking about things like Marshall with the Studio series, which I just think is phenomenal, right? You know, people aren't out gigging or even touring as much with these massive stacks of amplifiers like Marshall was known for. So what do? Make it smaller, make it more manageable, make it something that average players can get their hands on. And again, even pro players, you know, sound is so meticulously controlled on big stages nowadays that even a lot of touring guitar players want something much more manageable than these massive half stacks or full stacks that need to be cranked. It just doesn't suit the modern world. So I love that companies have adapted and they've been coming out with these sort of mid-level, reasonable, both in volume and functionality, but also in weight. And for that, I said, you know, manageable amps as opposed to tube amps, because I also wanted to bring up things like Fender's Tone Master series, which, you know, there's some things about the Tone Master series that I'm a little this about, but I love the idea. I love the idea that you can get more control over your tone in a lightweight package that's very, very gig friendly. Again, when I started playing guitar, you have any idea how many dual rectifier half stacks were out there? It was just completely insane. And the reality is, people just don't need that kind of sound. They just don't. Fine if you like it, fine if you're willing to do that and bring it out, but I think the older a lot of us get, the less we really want to be doing that. Number 2. Now, I say done right here, vintage modern guitars done right, because this sort of has been attempted for a long time, and many times they didn't quite get it right, at least in my opinion, but I love the idea of vintage modern guitars for people who love the vintage kind of feel and mojo, but who need some practical modern things. You know, the best example of this is actually, you know, and this obviously goes back to the 1970s, but is a Fender having the truss rod adjustment in the neck. Now, I have some vintage style Fender guitars, and I absolutely love them, but they still have the truss rod adjustment down in the heel of the neck. So, you know, there are some that you can kind of pop the pickguard off and you can get at it, but some you have to actually take the neck off if you're going to do a truss rod adjustment. Now, as brilliant as Leo Fender was, nobody gets everything exactly right the first time. And in Southern California, where really the climate doesn't change that much, that's not going to be much of an issue. But here in Maine, where there's crazy humidity changes throughout the year, that makes a big difference. I need to do a lot of neck adjustments. Lately, it's been extremely humid. In a couple of months, it's going to get extremely dry, and the necks are going to kind of go like that, you know. So things like that, I think, where companies have kind of stylistically kept them more vintage looking, but upgraded these features. Another great example is having them paint shielded for quieter noise response, or, you know, on a Stratocaster style, having the middle pickup reverse whine, reverse polarity, so that you get hum canceling on the 2 and 4 position. Having a 2-point trem on some vintage style Stratocasters, really, really cool idea. Or, you know, modern material like a Tusk nut. There's all kinds of different things, you know, compound radius fretboards, and different things that you still have the vibe, the look, and the feel of a vintage instrument, but you have some modern appointments that players actually need and can use. I think that companies have really started hitting that nail on the head. no matter what company you're talking about. I just see the kind of future of the style of guitars like that. They're hitting the right notes, at least for me they are. And the number one guitar gear trend is going to sum up this entire video. There have always been and will always be polarizing voices in the guitar world. In anything, you know, as you talk about sports, you talk about fashion, you talk about, you know, whatever it is that people are into, you're going to have people who have extreme opinions. Now, again, when I started playing guitar, there weren't as many resources on the internet that everyone was kind of gravitating towards and going to all the time. So a lot of these opinions, you didn't have them balanced basically because you didn't see the whole playing field. Now, people will kind of talk about how kind of vile sometimes internet forums and internet comment sections can be, but I think one of the good things about them is that the more of these crazy polarizing opinions you see, the more reasonable voices you see also. And the more people are able to let go of those polarizing opinions. So, you know, whether you're talking about the strings, whether you're talking about tube amps or digital or any of the other things that I've talked about in this video, I think one of the cool things about guitar gear is I at least see, gotten to a place where people are way more comfortable just getting the tone that they want, the way that they want, and not worrying so much about someone leaving a long nasty rant about why they're doing it wrong. The results are what's important. If you get a good tone, who's going to tell you otherwise? So those are the trends in guitar gear that I see that I love, that I think have moved the kind of general consciousness of modern guitar players who are in this world in the right direction. Let me know, what trends do you love? Again, kind of with the caveat there that the idea of a trend is kind of like, okay, let's all just do our own thing here. But, you know, sometimes when you see a trend happening, it can also lead you, the positive thing is it can lead you to try something gear-wise that you might not have otherwise tried. And that could be good, it could be bad, but, you know, the more experience we get, the more we're able to refine our sound and refine our ear to get the sounds that we want. So let us know what you think in the comments. I'm Jack Fossett. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.